Hey everyone, I'm Spencer, and today we have got the brand new Kroot Hunting Pack box set to go through, and we're going to paint it and go through some of the lore too. The Kroot are a carnivorous xenos species that are heavily allied to the Tau Empire, and the new Hunting Pack box set is a great starting point for an army of these alien beasts. We obviously have a bunch of sprues in the box. We also have this really nice Tau themed folio, which contains our assembly instructions, the data cards for all the Tau units including our Kroot, and this beautiful Tau codex. For this army, I took inspiration from the classic Kroot Carnival art by the wonderful Karl Kopinski. I especially like this one with the red hand here. Could be blood, but I like to think of it more as tribal marking or something like that, so I'm going to incorporate that into my scheme. Because this is an army scheme, and there's a lot of skin on the Kroot models, I'm going to be using an airbrush quite a lot to get some nice tones in there to begin with. So that means wearing a mask and gloves, and I'm using the Gallery GHPM Mobius 0.3mm airbrush. One of the key abilities of the Kroot is to take on the DNA of other species by eating it, which leads them to inherit some of their characteristics, both mentally and physically. The Shapers are Kroot leaders, and they make the choice of which strains of DNA their kindred will take on. Unfortunately, it doesn't always go right though, and some Kroot end up stuck in an evolutionary dead end like the lumbering Krootox. With all the models built, I started off priming them with Vallejo Model Air German Red Brown. You can see the amount of overspray on the box here, and that's why it's really important to wear a mask and gloves when you're doing so much spraying. A little tip when you're doing army painting is to work in batches, and it helps to have your desk set up in a way that makes that easier. So for example, I have all my models on one side of my desk, my DIY spray booth in the middle, and a space on the right of the desk, so as I prime the model, I can move it from one side to the other and keep them organised as I work through them. The next step in our paint scheme is to use Tamiya XF76 Green Grey. This is a solvent based paint, so we have to use the Tamiya X20A thinner to thin and clean this paint through our airbrush. We're going to be spraying this from above the model so that we can see that red brown underneath still. I've added a few drops of X20A thinner to the airbrush to lube it up, and then I've added XF76 at about a 1:1 ratio with a thinner, and this paint goes through the airbrush really nicely. I've been working my way through the models, and the only real care here was that I didn't want to build up the paint too quickly, so we're going to build up slowly on each one so that we don't get too much overspray and we can leave that nice red in the shadows. With the way that the Kroot can take on DNA and characteristics from other races, it really opens the door for being creative when it comes to choosing your colour scheme, and I decided that I was going to feature the red hand and feet on all of my Kroot like that one chap from the inspirational artwork. So I mixed up a shot glass with Flesh Tower Red and contrast paint in a 1:1 ratio. I'm going to apply that liberally on all the arms, forearms, lower legs and feet. Try to be quite neat here and avoid getting it onto anything that wasn't the skin, like the weapons or the spines. For the rest of the skin, I was originally going to do an oil wash, but after testing a few models I wasn't really that pleased with the results, so I decided to stick to acrylics and use a 2:1 ratio of contrast medium to skeleton horde and applied this all over the skin, including the red arms and legs, to add some extra definition into the models. From here really, we're just going to be colouring in the model with mostly contrast paints and metallics. Usually when I do this, I like to work from the largest areas to the smallest, as I find that getting the big daunting tasks out of the way early helps me feel like I'm making a lot of progress, and then I can finish the detailed work up later on. So aside from the skin, the next largest area on most of the models is the leather. For this I used Cygor Brown directly from the pot. On the Flesh Shaper, he has so much leather that I decided to break up the colours a bit to make it interesting and include some snakebite leather on some of his leathers too. For the quills, I went with Fire Slayer Flesh, which has a bit more of an orangey red tint to it, which I thought would contrast nicely with the skin. For the small spines sticking out the skin, I used the Fire Slayer Flesh too, but made sure to get it around the edges so that it soaks into the recess between the spines and the skin to make them stand out more. So the Kroot are mercenaries and scavengers, and they don't only just take on the DNA from other races, but they also take on their technology too. They're most commonly allied to the Tau Empire after the Tau came to the Kroot's aid to rid them of the greenskin invasion of their enclaves. After this 10-year-long war, called the War in the Place of the Union, the Kroot leader Angkor Proc requested the Tau leaders come to their homeworld of Pek, or Pech, not really sure how you pronounce that, where the great Kroot leader swore allegiance to the Tau Empire and the greater good. and also not to eat them. The Kroot technology looks a bit primitive with lots of wood, which is why we're going to be colouring in using wild wood. Despite their primitive weapons, they do actually have access to some pretty advanced stuff, like their war spear spaceships, which are actually warp capable, unlike their friends the Tau. After the wood, I wanted to lean into the primitive battered look of their weapons, so I started off with lead belcher on all the metal parts. And I followed that up with a wash of AK Black Knight, which turns them into a lovely grimy colour. From here I did some AK Dark Rust and Extreme Rust, which are enamel paints, so with these I made sure to use cheap synthetic brushes and to wash them out using enamel thinner rather than water. For the basing, I kept it really simple, took a bit of inspiration from the art. I started with MiG Vietnam Earth and added some Rivalcraft's Deadlands tufts here and there. Once that had dried, I applied AK Ochre Rust pigment liberally across the base and feet of the models and added some to the tufts too. For the eyes, I gave the sockets a wash with Caribou Crimson, and once that had dried, I used a few different yellows to give this really feral, primitive look to them. And here's our finished army. It's not quite in line with the inspirational art, but I really enjoyed painting these, and I think the results are quite pleasing for an army project. I'll be happy to paint up a bunch more of these and finish a full army. Thanks for watching everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps and keeps me doing what I'm doing. And we'll see you next time. Bye!